Hi, this is Scott Garibay, and today we're going to talk about Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition, and we're specifically going to ask the question, is the new book that's coming out, Wild Beyond the Witchlight, it's a Feywild-focused Dungeons & Dragons hardcover adventure, is it a betrayal of the core principles of Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition, and also by extension, the core principles of Dungeons & Dragons overall? Here's the answer, yes. Wild Beyond the Witchlight is a fundamental betrayal of the core principles of Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition. All right, so let me explain why this is the case, and then what should be the ramifications for the Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition design team now that they have betrayed the core principles of Dungeons & Dragons. All right, here we go. All right, so why is Wild Beyond the Witchlight a betrayal of the core principles of Dungeons & Dragons? Well, the core principles of Dungeons & Dragons were defined by Mike Mearls, who, in my opinion, is actually the best game designer for Dungeons & Dragons that has ever existed. I think he surpasses Gary Gygax as a game designer, as a Dungeons & Dragons game designer. I think Gary Gygax is one of the best game designers in the world, and certainly in American history. Because he created it and he innovated it, right? His innovation, he doesn't compete to be the best game designer, the best Dungeons & Dragons game designer. He is the best American game designer. The work he did on Dungeons & Dragons far surpassed Dungeons & Dragons, and in my opinion has surpassed every existing board game in the world, right? So Gary's in a different league. He doesn't even compete with Mike Mearls. He's actually... he definitely is in a different league, right? So with all that said, Mike Mearls defined the core principles. What are the core principles? Well, the core principles for Dungeons & Dragons are threefold. They are exploration, right? They are specifically exploration, interaction, and combat, and they are critical, right? So, this is really important because before this was defined, it gave us, you said these are three principles and they're equal, right? Combat is not combat is the minority of this game. Now, I will say the Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition team has 100% failed. Like, there's so much combat specific content. The page count reality does not match the intended statement, okay? But that doesn't mean that the intended statement wasn't important. It was incredibly important, right? So the core principles of Dungeons & Dragons are you explore, you interact, and you do combat, right? Well, Wild Beyond the Witchlight said you can take care of every single encounter in this book with exploration and interaction. And you do not need to use combat for any. So you can Nuzlocke this thing. You can do this entire book and never do combat at all, right? That is a fundamental betrayal of the core principles of Dungeons & Dragons. It was wrong, it was a mistake, and it should never have been done. And here's why. I'll tell you right now, I do not ever, ever, ever want a book that allows you to deal with every single item in the book, every encounter in the book with exploration and combat. That will be wrong. To remove interaction from the game would be fundamentally wrong. It would be a betrayal of the core principles of Dungeons & Dragons, and it would make for a bad book, right? A book that should never have been printed, right? Okay, so it would be a fundamental mistake. Also, I do not want a book that allows me to handle every encounter with interaction and combat, and no exploration is needed, right? Every D&D book needs to adhere to the core principles that Mike Mearls set. And also, I will say now, not only is the Wild Beyond the Witchlight a fundamental betrayal of the core principles of Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition, right? They are a betrayal of Dungeons & Dragons, the game, as a whole. Okay? And why is that, right? Because when Mike Mearls set those into place, exploration, interaction, and combat, They had always been in the game. Okay, they had always been in the game. And all he was doing was setting the prioritization and stating it clearly, because before it was unsaid. The message was there, but it was never said clearly. And it was incredibly important that Mike Mearls distilled it, and then he set it into place, right? And it has been a guiding principle. It has been 3 guiding principles for a long time. This was a core fundamental betrayal of the betrayal of the core fundamental principles of Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition and Dungeons & Dragons itself. Okay? So what should be the ramifications for the Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition design team now that they have made a book that should never have been printed? Well, the ramifications that they should pay is your purchase. You should buy this book. Why on earth should you buy a failure of a book? Well, here you go. I want Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition design team to fail. I want them to fail at a rate of 10 to 20%. Okay? I am a massive Google fan. I love Google. Google Buzz, Google Reader, Google Glass. These are all massive, full failures, and they were needed, right? The only teams that don't fail are teams that are not trying risky, exciting, adventurous things, right? And the thing is, I would be here to naysay the Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition design team if the majority of their books were failures, but that is not even remotely the case. The vast majority, I would say 80 to 90% of all the books the Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition design team have made since 2014 have been successes, right? There have been some failures. I'll give you some failures. Acquisition Incorporated, total failed book. Also, Volo's Guide to Creatures, I think. That thing, it just sits like it's a lump. It does nothing in my collection. I wish I hadn't bought it, right? Like, it's just a frustration. But the DMG, the PHB, the Monster Manual, Xanathar's Guide to Everything is a radiant, beaming, shocking light of wonder, right? Tasha's is super cool. I love it, man. I really, really like it. Those books I'm so down with them. Explorer's Guide to Wildmount, fantastic. Bringing in all the critters. We got that sweet, sweet Matthew Mercer book. These are amazing, successful books, right? So here's the thing. If you go skiing and you ski all day and you never fall down once, you didn't hit any good, double black diamonds, man. You got to try things, and sometimes it's going to fail, right? So my hardcore response to the Dungeons & Dragons design team making a failure of a book that betrays the core principles of Dungeons & Dragons, is that I'm going to buy that book from them. I'm going to pay cash at my FLGS, the full $50, no Amazon purchase, right? The only question is if I'll buy the special cover or not. I will buy this book. And the reason why is I am down with the Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition design team. I think for a while, I was frustrated with Dungeons & Dragons, but every day that passes, it just becomes super clear to me that the Dungeons & Dragons design team is working incredibly hard to bring us the best possible books they can in the most timely manner. And sometimes they're going to fall, and sometimes they're going to fail. I think that The Wild Beyond the Witchlight is a core, fundamental betrayal of the core principles of Dungeons & Dragons. How did they forget that? Well, they've published 30 books. We're coming up on close to 30 source books for Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition. That's a lot of work, right? And so, like they said, David S. Pumpkins is one of my favorite SNL skits, and it's about an elevator, a Tower of Terror elevator, and there's 100 floors, right? And 2 of the people are like, "Oh, that wasn't very good," and the elevators guy's like, "There's 100 floors. They're not all going to be winners," right? So I do definitely think Wild Beyond the Witchlight is a failed book, right? It is a fundamental betrayal of the core principles of Dungeons & Dragons. But the ratio is where it needs to be. That's my opinion, all right? So with all that, do you agree or disagree? Do you think that the design team should be making books that deny one pillar completely? And if that's the case, why on earth would you do it? Also, was there prejudice shown, right? By removing the combat pillar, but not removing exploration and And interaction, is that showing prejudice toward a concept? Very well might be, right? Like, it's very, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Also, will you be buying Wild Beyond the Witchlight? I'm encouraging you to. I think you should. Actually, increasingly, I'm becoming of the opinion that every dungeon master should be buying every single D&D 5th edition book. I think we're in a golden age. I really don't think the game has ever been done, and I think every DM should buy every book if you got the cheddar. Like, if you suffering out there, I get it. No worries, you get a pass. But if you got the cheddar, get them. And I'm definitely getting there. I will be buying every book they put out for the rest of the year. No two ways about it. All right. All that's my opinion. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Let me know in the comments below. Please consider liking and subscribing, and have a wonderful millennium.